The most anticipated, likely the most watched presidential debate is now in the history books. Former President Trump against Vice President Kamala Harris. So who do you think won the debate? The Trump camp is already stating that the moderators were also adversaries, suggesting that Trump was taking on 3 against 1. Before we get into the analyzation of who may have won and who may have lost, the one-liners and things like that, let me be clear. I actually do agree that the moderators acted in favor of Kamala Harris in ways that they should not have, such as correcting a couple statements that Trump made. Highly controversial statements, in my opinion. They didn't need to correct them anyway, but they did step in and correct Trump, I think 2 or 3 times, suggesting that they fact-checked him, suggesting they've already checked on a statement he made, and their information has come back to suggest what he's saying is false. They did that, I think, 2 or 3 times. They didn't do it at all on Kamala Harris. Is that going to lead us to indicate that Kamala Harris was 100% honest and only Trump told lies? I doubt it. I doubt that that is true. So the moderators should simply ask questions and let the folks respond and maybe point out when they've gone over their time or did something to break the rules. But I don't think the moderators should engage in fact-checking, because it does leave avenues for the Trump camp to say what they're saying. And as I stated, I do believe they do have a valid point, considering it was only done to former President Trump. But that doesn't mean he won. I'll go into some of the actual gotcha statements and things like that. Overwhelmingly, most of the most well-known daggers to the opponent were said by Kamala Harris. Trump was on defense the entire night. And if you're on defense, you're likely losing. I mean, from the moment Kamala Harris came out, walked over to his side and shook his hand, almost showing an attempt at dominance, she certainly looked far more prepared for what they did last night, for that debate. A lot of you folks may disagree with that, but she certainly looked more prepared. She threw a lot of jabs at Trump. Trump is normally the one that engages in name-calling and personal attacks. She called the man a disgrace. She stated that Vladimir Putin of Russia would have him for lunch. She stated that many of our allies and other world leaders are laughing at him. He wants to be a dictator. He fired some jabs at her, but they certainly did not have the sticking power that hers did to him. Now, many would say, well, hell, you're just being, biased. You guys everybody's going to go to the side or the camp that they favor. If you support Trump, you're going to say Trump won. If you support Kamala Harris or you're a Democrat, you're going to say Kamala Harris won. That's not necessarily true, and I'll tell you why. When Trump debated Biden on June 27th, most liberals and Democrats admit Biden got his ass kicked. You didn't see a lot of Democrats suggesting that Biden won. They may have stated that maybe Trump was dishonest or, maybe he wasn't telling the truth throughout the debate, but they did admit Biden lost. So the idea that Democrats or that Republicans would not admit when they side won or lost, I don't submit to that theory. I think that certainly if the defeat is big enough, I think you can call balls and strikes no matter who's pitching the ball. And in this case, I think there's enough of it. Certainly with all of the punches that Kamala Harris landed versus Trump. Trump did land a couple punches. He suggested that her policies are as simple as run, spot, run. He also he reused her line that she used on Vice President Mike Pence at the time during the vice presidential debate, where she told him, "I'm talking," and literally shut up Mike Pence. Well, Trump used that against Kamala Harris, and he followed it up by saying, "Sound familiar?" I will give him a little bit of a jab for that. I don't know if it really hit home as hard, but he did throw it out there. And the reason I'm saying I don't know if it hit home as hard, because even the right-wing media outlets is not really talking about the jabs Trump threw at Kamala Harris. They're mostly saying the moderators acting in favor of her, and then they're going to her policies and kind of criticizing a breakdown of what she said. But there's not a lot of folks stepping up. It's on the right. Not a lot of folks on the right stepping up and bragging about how great Trump sounded in the debate last night. So that should tell you something, because if you look on the liberal side of the aisle, they're celebrating what came out of Kamala Harris' mouth. 180 degrees different from what you're seeing when Biden was up there. Wasn't a lot to celebrate on Biden at all on June 27. Totally different from the old "won't you shut up, man" debate. June 27 sucked for Biden, which is why he's not here. But some of the jabs Kamala Harris threw, wow. Like I said, the whole Putin will have you for lunch, calling him a disgrace, all of this stuff just very, very memorable. But probably the biggest jabs that Trump suffered came by way of his own statements. Number one, you're seeing it all over social media, is the claim that in Springfield, Ohio, illegal immigrants are eating pets. I'll tell you this, with my tiny ass corner of social media, I got a little bit over 100,000 followers on a couple different platforms. I would pay, if somebody's eating cats and eating dogs, I would pay if they would let me film it. Now they're poor and they can't afford to eat nothing but a cat or a dog. I would give them money to let me film that. Do you realize how many clicks and views? You get millions of views from that shit. If that was happening, somebody out there would have footage of it. The fact that there's no evidence, solid evidence of Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs, the fact that there's no solid evidence should be telling, because it would be worth millions of views. The right, Fox News, and they may have to blur it out, but the right would be covering that shit like crazy. Not a single clip. Nobody sitting at the kitchen table with a grilled up cat, maybe the tail of a dog. Not one person. That tells you something. Also, he suggested that Kamala Harris is in favor of giving incarcerated illegal immigrants sex changes. Now, or sex operations. Now, once again, this is kind of similar to Trump's other playbook about kids going to school and while in the custody of the school, coming home to their parents a day or two later with a sex change operation that their parents had no clue of. Just like with the claims that people are eating pets, no solid evidence that this has ever taken place. And I think that's where the issue with Trump is that he makes these very controversial statements. They easily could piss off a lot of people because a lot of this stuff is awful, should not be happening. But when it's time to show evidence of it really taking place, there's nothing there. I mean, where is an evidence that a child went to school and came home later, a couple of days later, with a different gender, and the parent was not in on it, was not advised? I mean, is there even one example of that? Very similar to the claim that people are eating pets. Now, he also talked about post-birth abortions. You're hearing this a lot on the right because it's not just former President Trump. Ron DeSantis was saying it when he was running for office as well, that the Democratic Party are essentially allowing moms. Now, here's a quote from Trump. After the baby is born, this is the quote, they put the baby to the side, a live baby, and they make a decision on whether to execute it or not. That's an actual quote from Trump. Once again, zero evidence that this has actually happened. These are notable quotes from last night's debate that I believe hurt former President Trump. Now, the moderators, likely no fans of former President Trump, stepped in and corrected him, not only on the claim that illegal Haitian immigrants are eating pets, but this post-birth abortion stuff. They also stepped in and stated that, what he is claiming happened is not legal in any state in America. They should have let him say it and left it at that. Simply put, if you're not going to correct Kamala Harris, you shouldn't be correcting former President Trump. That's not the job of the moderator, and it does leave them open for what Trump and his supporters are saying, is that the moderators were also on the side of Kamala Harris. They should have just let him say this stuff. I think at the end of the day, once again, just like with the eating of animals, only deep MAGA folks who are really strong supporters of Trump believe that mothers are having children, putting the baby to the side while it's kicking and goo-goo gaga and the doctor and the mom are deciding whether to take the life of the baby. Most independents, liberals, progressives, libertarians, they don't believe that's happening. And I don't think anyone in America has actually seen a solid case, actual evidence that that's taking place. So they didn't need to fact check that. I think most Americans kind of know that already. Now, Trump did swing back. The border is obviously a easy target for Kamala Harris, but she did throw a slight jab back. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the border, 3 years under the Biden administration, out of control. She's the alleged border czar. There's clips of her on television saying the border is fine. She was hesitant to go down to the border. It's an easy attack, but the slight counterattack that Kamala Harris has is obvious. You canceled the border bill. In the last year of the Biden administration, when they finally did decide to do something about the border bill, Trump canceled the border bill on the grounds that if he is allowed to solve the border issue, as opposed to Biden, it'll be advantageous for him in his reelection campaign. So that is something that she could push back. In other words, if the border is that jacked up, but you are willing to leave it that way for a whole year so that you can win, then maybe it's not that jacked up. And that goes back and forth. But I think at the end of the day, Trump's going to win on the border criticism against Kamala Harris. Fracking is another one. An obvious flip-flop from Kamala Harris. She was against fracking, threatened to outlaw it. Now all of a sudden she's in the state of Pennsylvania promoting it. That's a somewhat of a win for former President Trump. Certainly proof that she did flip-flop on it. But at the same time, there may be a hell of a lot of folks in the state of Pennsylvania that believe her. Maybe they believe she evolved on her position. At the end of the day, there's a hell of a lot of things Trump once felt a certain way about, and he's evolved in the other direction, and MAGA tends to believe him. So, I assume that if you can believe that Trump may change on a position, there may be room to believe Kamala Harris can do the same. Another issue where she looked really bad, and she didn't have a response for, the 13 dead American soldiers during the botched Afghanistan evacuation. She didn't even answer the question on that. Now, I don't know for certain if the vice president is even responsible for that or not. Biden certainly should get blamed for that as president. I don't know what place the vice president has in that at all anyway. Just like they're blaming Kamala Harris for the economy. The vice president doesn't make decisions while the president is still alive at that level. The vice president doesn't control the executive branch. The vice president's not passing bills and things like that. So, look, you can try to tie them two together on that, but there's a reason why folks are giving Trump credit for the economy and they're not giving it to Mike Pence. It's kind of a clear sign that Mike Pence wasn't doing much. And that's the same thing here with Kamala Harris. She doesn't genuinely deserve accolades or criticism for the Biden economy. At best, all she can do is give him advice. That's really it. He still has control of the pen and all the power. So, but the 13 dead soldiers, she should have had at least an answer prepared. It's not her fault, but she should have had an answer prepared. At the end of the day, it's Biden's job to make the call and work with the generals or whoever's on the ground to do what needs to be done. The vice president's not involved in it. Vice president is not involved in it other than maybe sitting in the room watching what's going down or, having a conversation. But at the end of the day, all of that stuff's signed into law or the order is given from the top, from the president. Kamala Harris has nothing to do with that. So what do you guys think, though? Based on my analysis there, I think it's fair to assume that I think Kamala Harris won this time. I think Trump won by a landslide against Mike Pence, and I think he lost definitively last night. I certainly would. For me, in my opinion, even though I'm not a fan of the moderators getting involved. They should have left those folks up to their devices. I think Trump said enough controversial things that a lot of folks believe he should have left alone, that he would have been hurt even if the moderators hadn't opened their damn mouth up at all. He's still also suggesting he won the 2020 election, and a lot of independents, even a lot of Republicans, believe that is false. I'm watching Bill O'Reilly and Chris Cuomo on YouTube and social media, and they're saying the same thing. Like, he needs to leave that alone. He's also still speaking favorably of the folks that were arrested in regards to January 6th. Once again, outside of deep MAGA, most Americans believe January 6th was Trump's fault, and the participants are criminals. Why Trump is speaking favorably of them 4 years later, it's not helping them out. And a lot of more sound, insane minds on the conservative side are constantly stating, you need to leave that stuff alone. Let bygones be bygones. Quit talking about the 2020 election. Quit speaking favorably of January 6th, et cetera, et cetera. Trump's not letting it go, though. And Kamala Harris put down the traps. He stepped in every single one of them and started rehashing all of that stuff. What do you guys think? Do you think Trump actually won? Or do you agree with me that Kamala Harris came across as more cool, calm, and collected in this debate and kept Trump on the defense the whole entire time? Let your boy know in the comments. As always, feel free to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.